My name is Jacqueline Velis. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a program coordinator here in the programs department. It is me and many other hands who bring you tonight's third iteration of the conversation series. So, tonight's conversation. First I want to share a little bit about the program at large. So the Conversation Series is an intimate and lively program series that explores the creative processes happening here at Powerhouse through engaging dialogues designed by Powerhouse Art's fabricators, staff, and the collaborating artist. Tonight, we are brought together for a conversation on partnership, pattern, and play with interdisciplinary artist Pamela Council and our very own Director of Public Art, Brittni Collins. I've had the pleasure of working with them the past few weeks, and I'm really excited for what they're going to bring to you all today. I've heard a couple of iterations, and I'm just really excited for you all to hear about the process of creating a fountain for survivors, which hopefully you all got to see on your way in. If you didn't, please make sure to go by the elevators on the first floor, and you can actually see a portion of a fountain for survivors live. But before I share too much about the conversation and our featured guest tonight, as your host, I want to share a few housekeeping items because we are welcoming you into our Powerhouse. So, as a reminder, we have a quiet room available for use. If anyone needs a sensory safe space or just needs a breather or a stretch, the quiet room is located on your left of the small hall. Just turn the corner. It's in room 235. Another thing is please be mindful of how sound travels. We're in a concrete room, which is beautiful, but also means that sound is bouncing at all times. So if you take a phone call right outside our double doors, we will be able to hear it all. And then FYI, we have about 15 minutes at the end of the conversation for Q&A. And at the end of the night, we have a few moments for you all to connect with Pamela Council and Brittni before we depart for the night. Okay. And finally, and most importantly, I want to call your attention to the materials in front of you. In the spirit of play and creating works for the public, for tonight's conversation, Pamela and Brittni are inviting us to watercolor alongside them. At each of your seats, you have the following: an exclusive digital collage by Pamela Council using an illustration by our very own Director of Learning and Engagement, Jen Williams, just somewhere in the room. Okay, they stepped out, but kudos to them. The reference photo is by Michael Hull, courtesy of Times Square Arts, and actually will be displayed in the background, so check that out. And all the coloring pages before you were printed here at Powerhouse Arts. In addition to your coloring page, you also have a watercolor palette, a palette for mixing colors, scrap paper to test your colors and techniques. Oh, I thought you were demonstrating while I was showing. Sorry. Paintbrushes, a cup of water, and paper towels for mixing colors and cleaning your brush. And finally, watercolor pastels. So the gel sticks in the middle of your table, those are watercolor pastels. So you color with them, you add some water, and it will have this nice crayon pastel effect. So test those out. Now, finally, let me introduce you to tonight's featured guest. Pamela Council is an interdisciplinary artist using sculpture, writing, and performance to create multi-sensory dedications. Unlike typical memorials, these dedications, including Council's series Fountains for Black Joy, mine history, then use dark humor and bright colors in acts of veneration that honor the unsung while critiquing hierarchies of power. Council coined the term Blaxidermy, a portmanteau of blaxploitation and taxidermy, to describe their distinctive Afro-Americana camp aesthetic, which marries the absurdity and horror of the precarity of Black life in a colorful exploration of the material, cultural, and metaphysical. In this world, Council's transformation of everyday forms and materials is playfully cathartic. The sneaker outsoles, hair lotion, acrylic fingernails, toy with long-held structures of care and value. Pamela Council has created commissions for the Studio Museum in Harlem, Times Square Alliance, and Volta, New York. Council's exhibition history includes Aldrich Art Museum, Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, UTA Artist Space, New York Historical Society, MoCADA, the Luminary, Williams College Museum of Art, and the new Museum for Contemporary Art as part of Simone Leigh's Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter. Council has also been awarded residencies at Joan Mitchell Center, McDowell Colony, ISCP, BEMIS, Mass MoCA, Red Bull, Mosaic Project, Mana Contemporary, and more. Pamela Council is also an alumnus of Columbia University and Williams College, which awarded Council the 2022 Bicentennial Medal as a Distinguished Alumna. They are a recipient of the 2017 Joan Mitchell Painters and Sculptor Grant, 22 Harpo Foundation Grant, and a 2023 Guggenheim Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Pamela Council. And our very own Director of Public Art, Brittni Collins, has spent the last 10 years dedicating her career to advancing the needs of living artists. Previously, she was the Assistant Director of the Public Art Program in Times Square Arts, where she collaborated with artists and cultural institutions to experiment and engage with one of the world's most iconic urban spaces. Please join me in welcoming both Pamela Council and Brittni Collins.
Glad to be here. Thanks,
Wowzers. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you, Brittni. Thank you, Powerhouse. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah.
And to have my work here so everyone can check out the chunk of the fountain.
Yeah. Where should we start? Well, Pamela reminded me earlier today that this is actually our first public conversation about this project that happened 3 years ago in 2021. But before we get into that, should we address the activity?
Yeah. Let's address the activity.
Yeah.
So we wanted today to talk about play and reflect on play, and part of how this work came about for me was through a lot of experimenting with materials and seeing what happened. So I wanted to, Jackie invited us to have an activity while we're talking, and I wanted to do something creative that most of us have done before, but maybe haven't done in a while. So yeah, we made these coloring sheets for you to have fun and get into these mandala kaleidoscope images.
Yeah. So if you want to tap into this, zone out into this activity while we speak about this project, that again is inspired, or the page that you will be coloring is a reference image inspired by Pamela's own work. Yeah, enjoy that, listen to us, color, do your thing. We invite you to join us as eavesdroppers on this conversation. But I do think it's also pretty fitting to start with an activity like this. Pamela, I spent a little time, revisiting one of our very first conversations. We have a recording of a Zoom that we had in April 2021. And you start that conversation by introducing us to this practice of play that I see in your work, especially as you were going through, those initial reference images that would become the inspiration of A Fountain for Survivors, and how you described it as a very analog, old school process, almost apologetically, where you're I print out images, I paste them in my notebook, I draw over the images, I'm collaging things, I'm doing all of these, activities and these practices that can be seen as fairly playful, but they're also super generative for you, especially as you're going into a new line of work and responding to, this prompt that was introduced to you by us at Times Square Arts. And so, yeah, I just wanted to hear you speak more about that as we enter into the conversation of what that led to, the Found for Survivors. But yeah, if you could just speak about
Can we first acknowledge everyone here who is on the team for
that
this
was going to be the finale, but of course.
Oh, that was, no, I mean.
I was going to ask everybody to stand up, take a bow. But we can start there too, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
they probably don't want to stand up, but.
Well, I was kind of joking, but you can do that too.
But for the people who are here who
Yeah.
worked on the piece, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And
We're going to go down the line.
special shout out to Jean Cooney and Anna Harsani
Yes.
who brought this, initiated this work. Anna invited me to do a midnight moment, and I was like, ooh, nails. And then from there, Jean sort of brought up, oh, by the way, would you want to do a fountain? No pressure, but would you want to do a fountain for Times Square? My answer was, yeah, of course. Let's go. Which is kind of how everyone approached this project. Everyone who joined the team was just all in on it. And we worked very quickly, so there was a lot of faith involved, but there was also a lot of play. I mean, it was working in an experimental medium and at a fast pace on something that totally came from some crevice of my brain, required a lot of dynamic play. So I felt like ultimately that process was a reflection of this scrapbooking, vision boarding that I do is my first step. I think after the invitation, I went to Vegas. Yeah. Okay. That's usually where I go because it's an adult playground. I just go there by myself and walk around watching people play and getting input. I visited Times Square and saw the M&M store and the shiny surface. And wanted to reflect the playfulness that's already in places like Times Square.
Right. Which is also a location that wasn't entirely unfamiliar to you. You're one of those New Yorkers, that actually enjoys Times Square. Yeah,
I'm one of the odd New York natives who freaking loves Times Square.
Yeah.
Before I would go to Vegas and do the walk around, I would go to Times Square after school and just bump into people and see what was going on and people watch. And there was still a little bit of old Times Square activity back then. So it was adult play. And this was as it transitioned into family-friendly play. So I was thinking about that with the design too. It's the history of this destination.
Yeah. But even about the design itself, I remember it in some ways was led by this, one of the first references you showed us was this image from, I want to say, this Disney film. Was it Snow White? With the cloche and the, very precious rose underneath this glass dome.
No, Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
And so this idea of the whimsical and Alice in Wonderland, also being a part of the initial references that you were thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Beauty and the Beast rose glass thing is it's this object that is a central part of the narrative. Because it signifies the passing of time and time running out, this rose in the glass. time running out for Belle to fall in love with the beast, I think. I don't know. It's a strange.
Right? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
why
how
not?
that went. Yeah.
But like the time pressure of enjoying a fantasy, which I think is like something about aging, something about childhood, and about the living in the present that play offers us.
Which is something that I've had interesting to think about when you put that within sort of the setting within which this idea was conceived, right? 2021, a year into the pandemic. By that point, I think like half of New Yorkers were vaccinated. New York, or Times Square rather, was reaching, approaching back to its pre-pandemic, like pedestrian foot traffic counts. And there was like this, starting to be this like glimmer or flicker of like a return to the pre-pandemic world, but still very much like raw out there.
Yeah, very much nature is healing. Like,
Yeah, but still not, when will it ever be stable? But it was still a very, precarious moment in time. But then that was also the moment that this idea was birthed, right? A Fountain for Survivors, which would then go on to be this dedication to all of us that, survived that period of time, right? So I'm wondering if you could take us back to that moment of what was on your mind that brought you into creating this offering for the public.
what was your like?
Okay, sure. I'll answer questions
What was
too.
what was
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
like? If you could name the dominant feeling of like spring 2021,
Oh boy.
right?
Yeah, that was spring 2021. I was still very much in my like work from home life, even though I was working in a maybe Jackie gave the introduction, but I work here now. But back then I was working at Times Square Arts. So that was a very public job in the way that this role still is, but that's one that required you to be a representative of a very specific place that was experiencing, like a lot of places, was, experiencing something very significant that, we were responding to in different ways every day. It required us to be nimble with what the needs were for the people that were traversing through that space, right? And which were still a significant amount of folks. But I had that, privilege to be able to work from home and to continue my job with the safety of, working from my little desk in my kitchen at the time. While also trying to figure it out with Jean, what the heck are we gonna do in terms of having a public art program? What does that even mean, right? But at the same time, I remember having these conversations that creating public artworks was one of the safest ways for people to experience art and culture at that time, right? So it did also feel like this real responsibility. Which then became one that was shared with you, because that was still, a very uncertain moment, right? So,
My experience of that time, I was like really scared.
Yeah.
And I also have this immune system that makes me really sensitive to like getting sick. So I took the shelter-in-place thing pretty seriously, which means I had to come up with like ways to entertain myself. So I started building furniture, started making like the coziest possible home for myself to live in, and got like consumed by that between early 2020 and whenever Times Square Arts called me, honestly. So I was very much thinking about like even going into the public, making something that could still be cozy and still feel like shelter. So yeah, that's where a lot of the design came from.
Yeah.
And offering, I was thinking about you guys and the other essential workers, I think we called them then, right?
Yeah, right.
Who were working in Times Square, you know, who were still like coming in to be a barista at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Or like working at Forever 21, because I think it was still open. You know, like I was thinking about those people as people who needed something really fun during their breaks, if they were going to be coming out into the public every day. So, yeah, I was thinking about the survivors who still had to be out there, and survivorship in general, because it was a site-specific work for this neighborhood with such a storied history. It was the 20th anniversary of 9/11 that fall. And so I thought, like, you know, I don't know. There was so much uncertainty, and I was scared. And I was like, I don't know what's coming, but I know what it feels like to be a survivor. So why don't I make something that can be like a beacon, a welcoming beacon for this population? Everyone who makes it out of this thing alive is going to be a survivor. So it's for all of us.
Right. We should also maybe, you know, get into materiality.
Yeah, we can talk materiality.
Yeah. I mean, from the surface in, perhaps, thinking about the exterior, there's a couple different components here. What you're seeing behind us takes you through the process. Well, maybe, I mean, from the interior here, this image here is the core of the work. The foam, say what?
We can describe the work. I mean, in case you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I sort of assumed everyone who's here knows what we're talking about, but I shouldn't assume that.
Yeah, I don't know.
So A Fountain for Survivors is a fountain with 3 tiers, 3 bowls of fountain, 13 feet tall or something like that, housed inside of this asymmetrical shell, which you can see like the beginnings of the sculpting of here. And the shell is covered by a mosaic of almost 500,000 acrylic fingernails, somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 acrylic fingernails that were placed one by one. And there's music playing inside, and there's a heater inside, and it was this enclosed private space in public.
Yeah. Private space in public, which is a funny thing to think about in Times Square of all places, where it's difficult to have just that space of stillness, and especially, this is October, we gotta like put it seasonally, October through December, right? So it was also important for you to make sure that it was warm. And I'm thinking about some of these other considerations that came up in the work, like not only So at every opportunity that allowed you to think about how this work would, interact with the audience, how that would land was something I recall you being very thoughtful of. One, yes, thinking of the season, putting the heaters in there. Also just the water. There was this moment where you thought maybe the water should be fragrant or have a perfume in it, but you're like, no, that could be very impolite for people that are sensitive to smells.
Let's design a coin that's got the perfume embedded in it.
Right, the wishing wafer.
I mean, I did have a sort of process of evaluation for every question, every decision that came up, and filtered it as much as possible through the question of like, what do we need? What do survivors need? What is the offering? And also, like, this is my first public artwork.
Right.
And it's like a monument in Times Square. And I had this incredible team of you guys at Times Square Arts and Art Demonte and Powerhouse Arts and Jeremy. And like, I had this incredible team of brilliant people trusting me. So, so like, you don't get that every day. Not just brilliant and capable, and trusting my vision, which is kind of wacky because it's a 20-foot sculpture covered in acrylic fingernails one by one. I mean, I've been working with acrylic nails since 2008, and I came to the material like through a respectability politics journey where I was like judging other Black femmes about how they looked. Just wild to think about. But I was like, I thought that I would like be able to proselytize and like bring people to like the natural hair movement and to like self-love through rejecting femme aesthetics. And so I like bought all these acrylic nails thinking I would do that. And I got seduced by the material. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like the tangrams I used to play with. And you can do a mandala geometry with these nails. And then I started putting them on, and then all of a sudden I had wigs on, and then, oh no, it's like I took off my glasses and ponytails and turned into like, like a Barbie girl all of a sudden. I don't know, it was transformational, and it was like, it was play. It was like playing with beauty and performance, and like way more empowering than my parents had warned me about, It was not scary. It was like filled with craft. So I think that happened pretty early on, and by 2009, I was like, these women that wear these long nails every day have been misunderstood, and I got to make work for them and like lift them up, like my mission flipped. How did I get here? Oh, what was I talking about? The materials?
Nails.
Yeah, so when I was invited to make this work and started thinking about survivors, I was thinking about a different material, but like...
mirrors.
I was thinking about mirrors and like a mirrored mosaic. And I was like, you know what? I think the people I'm talking to will see themselves in nails. Like, nails will be a mirror for my primary audience.
Which, funny enough, was, I'm pretty sure in one of my first interviews for Times Square Arts, I brought up my affinity for nail art and how I had this like fantasy of doing a public art project with nail art.
Really?
And may have even had my own idea for something like that.
Wow.
but so when this project came our way via Anna, I was like, oh my God, we have to do this. Because it's interesting to hear you speak about your transformation into your appreciation for nail art. I didn't know that about you. And that's, just part of your journey into, understanding the real power that those hold and how perhaps now, at least in the way it was represented through that project, has this sort of function as real armor for people. Because I think about how I came into nail art as a little middle schooler. And it was like, I came to school with my French tips one day, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, French tips.
You were that girl.
I mean, kinda, yeah, at least for that day. At least for that day.
Were they press-ons? Or were
No, I think I went to the nail salon. I got acrylic.
Middle school?
Well, yeah.
You were that girl.
I'm looking at my sister. Yeah. And since then, as a youth, it was very much that, about that sort of how it reflects your sort of status in your class in that space, right? But still very much so being this sort of protective style in this real way, cut to now, it's very much a self-soothing device for me. So all that to say.
It's a ritual too, right?
Very much so, right? And so even that is all represented within this project. And to have the opportunity to collaborate on that with you was whoa, for me, really. But then also just thinking about this idea of protective styles, right? That was, something that you would refer to often as you were speaking about the work, and then also speaking about it to your crew, the team of people that were producing and fabricating this work, right? So I just wonder, how the utility and the sort of understanding of that to this crew, was that something that you felt like you had to over-explain? I'm curious about that.
No.
Okay, good.
I didn't feel like I had to over-explain the materials, because I think that the protective nature of them was reflected in the form. But the challenge for me in material translation and working with a group of fabricators, which was a new experience for me, was, up until this point, my work had been, like I was saying, very much playing and discovering through moving my hands, and very intuitive in the studio. And so I don't know how many people we had applying nails, 20 maybe?
Buying nails?
No, applying the nails on the nail
for sure.
at least,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So teaching a group of people how to do this pattern, which was not symmetrical, no one piece of the pattern was the same. And sort of teach them how to have the intuitive edges of the work was the trickiest thing for me, because it was sort of a choreography. But once I made it clear that was a priority, I think everyone on the team was able to translate what needed to happen, which was a sort of teaching module.
You have little stations.
We had to teach people how to make the scallop pattern, and which I mapped out down to the singular nail, and everyone practiced for a few days, and then I had to go around and approve the scallop and say that's it, you got it, or ooh, the edge needs to be a little more organic. I really wanted this form to look organic, and for each of the scallop pieces of the pattern to sing together. And I feel like we really achieved that, and it was magnificent to see it come together nail by nail, like one nail at a time.
The geometry of
The
that
geometry.
mosaic. Wowzers.
Yeah. I'm glad also that you felt reflected by the nail art.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that was, throughout my mind for the whole project. I mean, even down to, I could see your consideration of how, again, these resources that were being offered to you were reaching the people that were interact with this work. Like even down to like, okay, if you got 4C hair and these water jets are if they're overspraying, that's going to be an issue for,
I was like,
a certain type of hair
a lot
texture.
of people aren't going to want to get wet when they go into a fountain. Like, I might not care, but like, being inclusive means that, like, people don't want to get their hair wet.
Right.
So, let's build that in. I totally
not
forgot
solely
about
is
that.
this, just not a matter of aesthetics. This is just, part of a care practice here.
Part of a care practice. Yeah.
Which also, it's not just specific to this single project. This is something that, is embedded in, if not all of your work. I'm thinking specifically of that series, Fountains for Black Joy, which has that as an ethos embedded into it as a means of, well, for many ends, but using as a point of departure the architecture that fountains represent and the history as them being, toys, right, for these powerful magnets that you're taking back.
Not just toys.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
Not just
continue.
toys, but 2015, I got really focused on fountains because I had been working in textiles for years, and I felt like people wanted to install my work in 20 minutes and just throw it up there, and not give it the care that I did and that I wanted to see for it. And also I felt like I couldn't reach my audience inside a gallery space. So what is an object that is still dealing with the body? Because I'm always interested in materials dealing with the body, that can go outside and that demands a ton of resources. What's a form that is about resource? And so I was like, I'm gonna make fountains. Fountains are literal resource to the body public, and I think I can take this classical form and flip it. So my first fountain was WTF is Juice, George Washington's Smile, and it was dedicated to the enslaved people whose teeth were donated to George Washington's dentures. And so it had this photo collage of his dentures, and then the fountain was a punch drink fountain filled with purple Listerine and purple drink, because George Washington, of course, was addicted to cheer wine. He could not stop drinking syrupy drinks and losing his teeth. And so, the title came from a Dave Chappelle joke about what Black people drink. Yeah, so that was the first fountain, which kind of set it off with these bizarre, fragrant dedications. Yeah.
I just think that's important to sort of touch on, especially when you think about the high degree of care that are required to upkeep fountains, right? And so you're demanding that same thing. And and it's not a matter of, it's intentional, the type of care that you're demanding of that type of work, because to bring it back to, again, like the origination of like how fountains were, what they symbolized, who they were, the offerings of, by you reclaiming that form and requesting the same amount, if not more, attention that would be given to one of these, fountains of yesteryear, that's you really, just reclaiming that type of power for your own work and representing it and reflecting it back to others, their power and what they deserve, right? So,
and it was, I mean, that move was like a self-care praxis for me too, like, and kind of a thought experiment as a survivor, like, what happens if I what happens if I decide to be high maintenance?
yeah.
Like, it's like a trust fall, And so, I don't know, it's probably not prudent to like build a trust fall into your work, but it's what I needed to do.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, and on this project for sure, I feel like so many people caught me. So.
Well, there's also like, all these rituals and being high maintenance.
Yeah.
And the fountain definitely exhibited that and called for that, right? Like the water itself having to be monitored every single day. Checking the exterior. How many fountains did we miss today? How many nails were plucked off the carapace? Because that happens every single day.
Yeah, nails and rhinestones getting snatched.
Yeah.
And like making sure she always looked good.
Yeah.
And
11:11 and 5:55.
we had wishing hours, so we offered people the wishing wafers. And like, how many people threw in the wishing wafers without removing the gold foil today?
Yeah. Or what else did they throw into the fountain today?
That part.
Let's, repair that. So, all of this is built into the work because it's demanding that it's being very articulate about its needs. And
was it Mitt Romney who talked about being a job creator?
Was that Mitt?
I don't know, but that's how it felt at the end.
Really?
It was like, this fountain.
You felt like Mitt Romney? Okay.
This fountain is an economy of its own, really. I mean,
that's true. We had, not only did this project itself require like over 60 people that worked on this project, but then, that also included the people that were caring for the fountain every single day, all of the public art ambassadors that were, overseeing this care practice for you. Oh my goodness, we only have 5 minutes, Pamela.
And welcoming people to the fountain every day.
Yeah.
A team of nail artists.
Yeah.
Who did we had some pieces that were hand painted, maybe 10,000 of those hand painted nails. So we had a crew of nail artists who, many of them were available because, again, 2021.
Right.
We had people applying the nails.
Yeah.
We collaborated also with Spaith on building the fountain. With someone sculpting the foam. Yeah, it was an incredible team effort. To the point where it's still kind of embarrassing to even take ownership of it. It was such a synergistic
Jeremy and
work.
Daniel.
It was Jer Bear.
And Daniel.
And Daniel. Yeah, and there was
Shore work.
No.
Okay.
I wanted to hear from you
Yeah, let me see what I didn't get to ask you.
more about collaborating with artists and artists of color, or artists who are taking advantage of the different programs here at Powerhouse.
Yeah, which is, I should also say, it's something that I'm still thinking about, how to make the resources within this space available to even more artists outside of just, the fabrication services that we make available. How can that be accessible to even more artists, but then also thinking about how the fabrication services themselves can, be supportive for artists like yourself at the time of when A Fountain for Survivors came into the world. This was, again, your first public artwork. And so I imagine folks that are entering into a prompt of that sort that do not have, the amount of resources that were pulled into that for you at the time. So thinking about the folks that before they even have someone asking who's commissioned the project for them, before, they have the funding, how can we help them build out their idea? And is there a space here where we can, help folks think through that design conceptualization, help folks think through how to prepare a proposal packet, and how to prepare that for conversations with gallerists, with curators, with donors, whomever, or just for the purposes of themselves as they think about, how to formalize an idea and package it together. I should be honest though and transparent. Currently, we're still very much a work for hire fabrication shop. Still, exploring what it means to stabilize, I'll say, so that we can do that with the type of care practice that I learned from you in many ways on this project, right? So, and yeah, I should also say that I'm still, and I can perhaps speak for the organization when I say this, still very much maintaining a responsiveness to what the needs of artists are. And so keeping that forum open for thought partnership around that. Because my background is, one where I'm not a maker. I'm an artist services administrator, right? So that's very much reliant on the needs that get communicated to me. So again, creating more forums to explore whatever those needs are is what I'm interested in right now. So if you have any ideas, please chat with me. I'd be very open to, having that sort of forum with you. But then also at the same time, on the other side of the table, fabricators need a lot of support. It's a collaborative. It's a collaborative, very deeply collaborative way of working. And so, I'm also, again, as someone who's coming into this space who previously spent so much of my career on the other side, being like as a client or as a funder. Very open to advocating for what those needs are too. So just, again, just trying to, be as responsible as possible. So that's something that requires time and, requires, such that it isn't done too quickly, right?
Yeah, and every artist needs in every project and every location.
Yeah.
It's different.
Exactly.
It's never a one size fits all. But
precisely.
It's nice to hear that that's important.
I think that's very much. I don't speak for myself when I say that by any means. So,
And you guys have supported this work, even beyond its first presentation in Times Square, right? We thought we had a next place where it would go, and turns out we didn't. a couple of times.
Yeah, that happens.
So also you guys continuing to be stewards of the work, has allowed us to continue to grow together. So
Right.
I'm super grateful for that dedication.
Well, thank you for trusting us as your partners in that journey.
My pleasure.
Should we end there? Oh my God.
Yeah, let's end
Is that a
there.
cute ending?
Let's take questions.
Okay.
Join me in thanking them for their incredible contribution. Again, check it out on the first floor. Just a piece of it, but it does give you an idea of this, of this fountain. Every time, thank you. Could y'all hear me in the back? Was that okay? Nice. Okay, cool. Thank you, Ariel. With that, I'd like to kick off our Q&A. I think we have about 10 minutes for a few questions. I'm just going to bring the mic to you, so please raise your hand if you have a question. Uh-oh. Perfect.
Also, how did coloring go? Did you guys enjoy it?
You can show your work.
Okay, good. Ooh, I love the variety.
Very nice.
Hi, thank you so much for the conversation. I don't think that I have a question or I have many questions, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I just was looking at the room and I saw like how everybody was so engaged in this flow. And I really appreciated that how it goes with the spirit of your work, because at the beginning, maybe your work, because as you said, like the scale of it and the uniqueness of the material of it, sounds like this is like a giant sculpture. But more than anything, I thought this is a placemaking for the community. And the flow of these nails and the flow of the idea of fountain is exactly like it's the extension of the sculpture today. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you.
I think my question relates to how do you, like, obviously you poured yourself into the artwork, which was entirely evident. How do you then turn your attention to your next project? Because I imagine, you feel as though you're continually connected to this thing that is now bigger than you, that you've shared with all of us. So how do you, divert attention away from this amazing thing and, go full force into whatever newly inspires you?
A really good question. I feel like in 5 years, I'll be able to tell you in hindsight how I did whatever I'm doing now. Right now, I don't have a definitive answer. Sort of like what Brittany's talking about with like the capacity building that's happening here at Powerhouse. That's what I've been doing in my studio practice. This, as my first public artwork, was such like, I can't even tell you how many points of connection there were that all came together like at the right on time and like seamlessly. And so for me, like the last 3 years, first I've been like focused on my health. I've had to like do some real like self-care, not working at least for the first year. The last 2 years has been like about sort of building my filter. I was so clear in my studio, studio to gallery practice of like, these are my needs, like this is how I know if it's good or not. I knew how to evaluate it. And now with being approached about public works and large scale works, I'm like building a new rubric for what is good and like what feels right and where can I compromise. So I'm like really learning about that week by week, conversation by conversation, and also trying to keep a balance with my studio practice, which never went away. Yeah, so I don't know yet exactly like what things will look like going forward, but I'm sort of like doing a negotiation play dance of like what is possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. And thanks for the watercolor. This is really great. I'm really curious about the process of like, maybe it's like transition between your creative, like the vision and the creating the thing, and then the process of turning it into fabrication and making it real, like in real space. Like, I don't know, like, for example, did you have exact dimensions, like, of how you're gonna enter, and, or is that more of a conversation between you and the fabricator, and, yeah, that kind of stuff? Thank you.
Dimensions aren't exactly how I think about things.
That's where it becomes a little bit of a collaboration.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's why this team was so special, because I don't have dimensions. I have like weird gestures. I want it to swoop like this. Like, I need it to be like a hug, like that, like in shape. And yeah, we need to make sure that under the lighting, the gold piping like tucks in just so. I have some very strange like obstacle course markers that need to be hit for me to be satisfied, that probably no one else is looking at, but like it's like the edge of finish that feels right. So whereas like some things I'm just like, as long as it's, you know, this and that. So yeah, for me, there's a lot of collaboration, negotiation in that part.
Yeah. I'll ask that, you know, we'll do our best to try and translate all of that or represent that with, you know, as much sort of fidelity to that idea as possible the first go round. But if we don't, then that's where that sort of back and forth comes up, where maybe in the first sort of iteration, it's just doing some blocking, understand and play with things like size that you're speaking of, and represent that in, you know, 3D space, or, you know, we'll go block out a sort of suggestion of what the scale and the square footage would be in this space, see how that feels. Go back to the design process, try and, you know, represent that and adjusted drawings once we feel good about that.
Yeah, we had like a footprint pattern that we went out to Duffy Square with and laid it out and checked the like orientation of things.
Yeah.
So I definitely had like a view that I wanted to nail. I definitely had a view that I wanted to see. Yeah.
We should say that part of the collaboration at that point in time was led by the, you know, very, I'll just say his name, Art DeMonte. Is he in the room? Where is he?
Where's Art? Hi, Art.
I was trying to think of a word to describe Art, but words failed me. So Art DeMonte,
Who is Art DeMonte?
oh, well, again, this is what I'm trying to say.
That was such a voice of God.
Yeah. Art DeMonte is an incredible public art producer who is the sort of creator, really, of the public art program here at Powerhouse, and led the department, and who we trusted to lead the development of this project at Times Square Arts, and was responsible for a lot of responding and solving a lot of these questions that we're speaking of when it comes to that sort of back and forth and negotiation, and representing, you know, a lot of your considerations and your choices within the work, and making sure that they were truthful to what you wanted to see, I would say. How would you describe Art DeMonte? Yeah.
I felt like the 4-person team of you, Jean, Art, Jeremy, like the core go-to. Like, I know there was a lot of stuff, because this work was under 6 months
Yeah.
from the invitation to the presentation. So it really is like a prototype, you know?
Right.
Almost everything was just the first pass. So there were things I know that I said, like, you know, you guys would ask me, like, by 3 o'clock, we need to know how we're doing this. And I'd answer you, and my sense was that you four would go and talk it over and figure out how it was possible. And then Art would probably go back to his lab and pull out one of his metal drawers of tools
Yeah.
and figure out, like,
Yeah.
from his vast experience of like an inventive way to do this. And his partner Marie Uchi was also on the team, who has experience making theater sets. So she was like crucial in helping to translate my pattern drawing and like map it onto this shape. So yeah, when I think of art, I mean, I think as artists, and Art is also an artist who makes like funny installations himself. But as someone who's supporting artists, all right, artists come up with ideas like, you know, I come up with like 20 ideas a day that I think are decent. Probably one a month is actually decent, but I think they're decent every day, right? So I'm filled with these like ideas, and for the most part, if it's an idea that's outside of my usual materials and my like comfortable skill set, it probably won't get made. Like it just lives as an idea. And when you're translating from like small scale works, or as I call it, like person scale works that I can put in the back of my car, into monumental scale, and you don't know how to do it, but you want to maintain your artistic voice, Art is the guy who knows how to do that. I mean, Art knows how to maintain the integrity of your like artistic voice and vision while also making like a durable object that can live outside in New York City in November. I mean, I was a student at Columbia when Kara Walker was working with Creative Time on her Sugar Sphinx. And so I got to see that process from her sketch to the Sugar Sphinx, which Art Demonte also led in fabrication. And I think that was her first public art project, or her first large-scale project, right? It was her first large-scale project, going from these like drawings. I saw her go from drawing to this magical 75-foot long thing. And that's because Art and Jean and the Creative Time team were able to carry that. I think of Art as an art doula, like a monument doula that helps you give birth to these things. Yeah.
That's Art Demonte.
That's Art Demonte.
I want to make sure that you all have some time to connect with each other after the talk, so this will be the last question.
Hello.
Hey, one of our collaborators,
Hey,
Jafia.
yeah, this is related to that last question and everything, but it's like, was there a reason there was only like one entryway? Like, was that a thought? Like, was that in the conversation at any point? Because like I didn't think about it like beforehand, but now I'm thinking like, whenever I'm in a space, I'm like, I need to see like the exit and stuff like that. So was there like a reason for that?
I was thinking of like a shell,
Yeah.
and things that you enter like in a spiral, and I also wanted a form that felt closed, that felt like you could go in and have your own private moment and see the door. Like, so in Times Square, the thing I like about it is that there's people going in every direction, but I wanted to make like one little safe haven where like there was only one way in and out.
Yeah, okay. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
being here.
Thanks for having
Rafia
me.
performed at the Carapace Cabaret.
It was awesome.
Right, y'all. With that, one final thank you to Pamela and Brittni for the work that you all do every day.